All right. I'm live, or I guess I'm alive. But if you guys can actually see me and hear me, then that would be a good time for you to let me know. Obviously, we always have a lot to talk about every single Monday, and I think it's good that we get together and make these little conversations happen. Make sure you guys let me know what you can see, what you can hear, and try not to comment too harshly on the actual appearance or sound of what it is you're experiencing right now. So I'm seeing it 5x5 flying in, and good to see everybody. Isaac Haney, we got Big Dog, Oida Turiant, we've got Oath Taker 276, Paul Garecki, Durgan's here, Grisio Nemo. Good to see everybody. Staten Island Preppers here as well. Exile Reviews and Rip Curl, thank you so much for being here and modding. So we obviously just need to keep preparing to the best of our ability, but we need to talk about what we should expect in order to adapt to it when that time of survival actually comes, which there is a good chance we'll actually have to start relying on some of our preps or at least some of our skills here in the near future. And a lot of us are going to have to experience things in a very difficult way, I assume, and mostly because of the fact that we are accustomed to being comfortable and accustomed to being able to get the things we need without trying too hard, I guess I would say. So these are things we have to start to consider. For all of you saying hello from Long Island, I am going to talk a little bit about your area tomorrow in a video, but nothing negative or anything like that, just about some of the things that are happening there. So no big deal. And, that probably doesn't represent the video at all, but either way, I will mention Long Island, I guess, at least once. So now what I want to say is, Mike H, you don't eat pasta, but you have a lot of it. That's okay, And I think that a lot of preppers have that kind of a situation in place for their food storage. Lots of rice, lots of beans. How often is that part of your regular diet? Things to consider. But either way, you're going to have calories, and that matters. Now, let's talk about why we need to be ready to survive and adapt to what's next, because adaptation is survival in many ways. And one thing that I think we can all agree on, and that needs to be addressed, especially when it comes to emergency preparedness, is that a lot of people maybe are slightly unwilling to adapt or have an idea about how things are going to be without adaptation being part of the equation. And those are things that we definitely have to keep in mind, because without a willingness to adapt, or at least without a concept of adaptation being necessary in mind, people are going to put themselves in a more difficult position for no real reason other than a lack of willingness to accept that things could be different than what they expected, right? And I think that's what we all have to definitely get accustomed to here very soon, is not being able to actually predict or expect exactly what is going to happen. And I think some of our leaders, if you want to call them that, have definitely shown us that we can't even necessarily have expectations of anybody in an official position as well. So Nameless 777, good to see you. I see that we have people here from South Dakota. We got people from North Carolina, and that's amazing. And as I'll always say, if you're looking to network with other people in the preparedness community and you want to try to meet people, especially in your local area, make sure you guys check out our Discord. It is a good place to be. We do get a little rowdy in there from time to time, but at the end of the day, it was something I put together to hopefully give everybody a way to network and build these communities that we are definitely going to need here very soon. So, all right. Hello, New Zealand here as well. Good to see you. And that is something I try to address. It's not always about states. Sometimes it's about other countries too. We have to have each other's back. So I'm glad people are here from all over the place. Now, let's go ahead and just get started with some of the things that are going on right now. Okay. And this is just where we are. Okay. We have to kind of touch on the immediate and then talk about more things related to, I guess things that are be a little bit more impactful on both you and I as time goes on. Okay. So we know what's happening overseas. We know there's a lot of fallout from it. And we understand that this update and regular news cycle is going to continually give us every bit of information they decide that you and I need to have. Now, here's something I definitely want everyone to keep in mind, okay? It is important to stay on top of these topics. It's important to understand where things are going, but we have to 100% keep in mind that not everything we're going to get is going to have the lack of bias, right? There's always going to be somebody in the editorial room dictating whether or not we're going to get the information that we need or are looking for. So understand that everything you read is going to have a level of bias from whatever perspective it's coming at you from. So use the information to the best of your ability, but then make sure you use a lot of sources and also check both sides of the proverbial argument to make sure that you have the most information you can get so that you can then formulate it into what the solution will be for your personal preparedness. We have to do our best at kind of game planning the things that are happening right now to be ready for what happens next if something was to, let's just say, spiral out of control, right? So let's see, Mojave Desert 3381. Exactly. There's a lot of that coming out of both of those regions. And of course, if anybody is a little bit, let's just say, newer to the game here, especially on this platform, if I avoid saying any certain phrases or certain, verbology, I guess is what I'll say, because it sounded better than vocabulary for some reason. I will just let you know it's a lot to do with the things that are happening in the world right now. And it's the same exact reason why all those things are coming out of those areas. That they're trying to make sure that we only say certain things in our realm as well. Okay, so now I don't know why it's showing a different screen now. So let's go ahead and talk about. See, this is an update. It just came up right now, right in the middle of the live stream here, and basically it's talking about can India do everything that the other regions could before and try to keep everybody fed throughout the entire crisis. And of course, it's saying India is the second biggest producer of rice and wheat in the world. So there you go, solutions, right? But either way, that's where we're at. So I try to keep tabs on what's going on. I use a lot of different sources. So 1 week you'll come here and we'll be checking, Fox News, and the next week we're checking BBC, and then, maybe it's Al Jazeera, and maybe it's even CNN, even though I feel relatively unclean when I have to visit their site. But these are things that we have to do to make sure that we're getting the full picture to the best of our ability. And that's just mainstream media sources. For everyone out there who thinks that that's the only place I get my information, trust me, that's not the case. But we also have to keep in mind that certain sources are not going to perform well when it comes to getting out this information here on this platform. So those are just things that I have to also mention, I guess. And coffee is something that's very important to me. Now, okay, I do want to mention now from another source, and this is obviously what a lot of people would consider to be opposition source, right? But it just depends on how you want to look at it. To me, it's just additional information that we can use to vet the other sources of information that we're actually acquiring. This source, obviously, you guys know what it is without me having to name it and without me having to show it, because that could cause problems, I guess. But this source is obviously coming from the perspective of those who, I guess you would probably say, are in favor of what's happening right now. And what they're trying to say is that next weekend is a big opportunity for one side of the argument to stage an event that would create a reason for more involvement in that region. And what they're trying to say is that they are going to use the Orthodox Easter weekend, which I believe is next weekend, rather than the weekend that we just experienced here in the United States. And they're going to use it as a way to cause destruction on places of worship in order to justify additional action in that region. So this is, like I said, the opposition is what we'll call it argument, saying that the people who are technically being the defenders right now are going to stage these events in order to justify additional engagement. So, and that's coming straight from that source, which is something that, we can't verify that information very well either. But just knowing that and being able to hear about it lets us know that that possibility exists, regardless of now whoever is the perpetrator. The possibility of it happening is definitely, I would say, higher, right? Because now we have that narrative already being put out there. And regardless of who does it, we have one side of it saying, well, we already knew this was going to happen from those guys. And we have the other side being able to use it as a justification for getting additional involvement from other countries, right? Or additional aid or whatever it might be. So these are things that we have to consider. And regardless of the validity of the information, the fact that it's out there can now allow that information to be weaponized, right? So now somebody can take that and use it to their advantage, regardless of which side of the fence that they are on. These are all the things that that people have to keep considering and understand that this is just where we are. And let's see here. Aga Oho says, sounds like rumors to me. Everything's a rumor until it happens. That's just how this works. Of course, in the fog of war, nothing can be verified very well unless you're over there on the ground and able to actually verify it with your own two eyes. So either way, we have to at least take this information and just keep it in mind and be aware of what could occur next week or not. And honestly, at the end of the day, as preparedness-minded individuals, we always want it to not happen. That's how all this is supposed to work. I don't want anything to happen. I don't want a natural disaster to happen, and I don't want a conflict to spill out of that region and into the rest of the world by any means. But I have to prepare for it to do so, because the likelihood of that is getting higher and higher every single day. Now, Gregory, Alberta Prepper, hello from Alberta, Canada. Well, hello from North Dakota. We're relatively close in the sense of north to south, I guess. But this is just something that we keep in mind. Now, let's talk about some of these other things that are occurring. So we all get worked up about this whole concept of a possible like nuclear situation, right? So when it comes to that, let's talk about some of the recent movements just to kind of get an idea of how this whole thing could escalate or eventually move into a different territory, okay? So now we have, obviously, let's just say intelligence coming out that these obvious bombers of sorts are coming into play, and they're in the region. And obviously this was already the case, I'm sure, but yet now it's getting to the point where it's verified and it's on imagery and video and whatnot, and people are just seeing this, and it's probably a poise situation where you want to show power and alert people to the idea that this is a possibility. But at the same time, like, this is the escalation. We're seeing this now, it's being deployed, and we know what the capabilities of those aircraft are. So these are things we have to keep in mind. Okay, get out of here. What's happening right there? Now, let's see here. Get your tuna now. All right, Sean Samuel says get your tuna now. Perfect. So obviously these are things that we definitely need to keep in mind, but those aircraft are actually there, and these people exist, right? And so we have to actually keep all these things in mind, that we are finding ourselves in an escalative environment where this is going to continually escalate if we aren't doing something different, I guess, right? Like, this is just going to happen like this. Now, I'm not saying that any kind of nuclear exchange is going to happen. What I'm saying is that it is still going to escalate. The level of de-escalation that would be required for this whole thing to just suddenly go away would be miraculous, let's just say, at the least. And I don't see that just happening overnight, and I'm sure you don't either. So now, let's see here. And I see someone's in the crowd saying, we bought some masks recently. Like, that's all good stuff. And like, we don't know what we're going to need some of that equipment for, but it is good to have. It's not going to hurt us to have some of these things. Now, we have these different forms of weaponry being deployed. We have these aircraft showing up. We know that this is just part of the deal. So let's talk about what we're doing here in the United States, because that's also something that I think needs to be considered. Okay, so let's see here. Hold on. This thing is trying to fight me now, of course, which is what always happens, right? The second I try to show you guys something, everything wants to fight me for it. And of course, yes, I've been shopping for tents and looking at shoes, so don't freak out about my algorithm advertising here, because they love to get on me about everything I look at ever. And I mean, hey, just in case you guys don't know, this brand over here, these shoes, SOM, they're actually made in the USA, and they're supposedly really nice shoes, but I can't get anything in a size 15, so maybe you guys should check it out and see what you can get. I can't. So, whatever. I was just trying to find a company that's made in the United States for shoe wear. Footwear, I guess, is the right way to say that. Now, the Pentagon looks to vastly expand weapons over in that region, okay? So vastly expand, I mean, we've already done quite a bit, I guess, is what I would say, right? But they're talking about more, a new aid package worth $750 million. And they're talking about, Humvees and a range of other sophisticated equipment. Now, we're going to talk about this later, okay? And we're talking, look, Mi-17 helicopters, howitzer cannons, coastal defense drones, protective suits, all kinds of stuff. Look, to safeguard personnel in the event of a chemical, biological, or nuclear attack. It just is what it is. I mean, they have to at least keep that on the table. For anyone who's saying that will never happen, I mean, they're preparing for it to be a possibility, which is exactly what you should do as well. It's not something we should ever just write off as, the consequences are too dire. Well, some people don't care. And in fact, some people don't necessarily agree with that concept because, hey, if they have more of it and can use it and get away with it, then what harm did it really do, right? And I think there's a lot of reasoning for them to believe that at this point in time, that the use of something, even if it was low yield or whatever, might be able to be allowed based on the way things have gone, right? Either way, this is what's happening. We're expanding our aid. So later here in this conversation tonight, we're going to talk about how that is problematic in many ways and how that's not helping the situation. Yes, it's helping those who need it, right? It's helping those who need the Nick Collins, I'm in Central Time, just so you're aware. It's helping those who actually need that stuff. But at the same time, it's not helping the situation de-escalate. In fact, it's doing the exact opposite. And I think we all know that if you help your enemy, you are going to become more of an enemy, right? It's just how it works. It's just, basic human psychology, right? If I help the guy that you hate, you're going to eventually hate me, right? And it's just going to keep growing and keep escalating and keep snowballing into something worse, because that's just what's happening right now. Now, let's see here. Tony Wilson, yeah. So there's a lot of things that are being portrayed and a lot of things that are happening. And of course, there's evidence for a lot of that. And of course, anybody would condone any of that kind of behavior. But the big thing that we have to keep in mind is that, all of these like crimes and stuff that are occurring, of course, are just that. But crimes have to be persecuted, right? We have to prosecute people who are breaking the law, basically. And in war, a lot of people just stop caring about that. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing. And I think people, especially who are very comfortable in westernized society, that haven't had to experience war in their own, backyard at any point in time, constantly think about like the law says they can't do that. But what makes you think that would matter at all if the same situation was happening anywhere else, right? I wouldn't prepare based on the idea that people shouldn't be allowed to do something. I just don't think that's the way it works. So I think that I agree that that is an atrocity and something that we don't want to have happen or see happening. But at the same time, I don't think that that matters to the people who are doing these things right now, because that's what war is like in many ways. Anyway, now, okay, so we know that we're doing our share of escalating. We know that there's a lot of stuff happening, okay? So what else is going on in the world? Just let's touch base on some other things now, because obviously there's a lot happening, and we can't just hyper focus on one particular event, because we're preppers. We want to be prepared for whatever could happen. There's a lot of things that could happen, right? We want to make sure that we are on top of it, so that way we don't find ourselves falling behind. When you hyper focus, let's say on gardening, for example, right? You're just gardening your life away, and it's all you do, and you're growing food. It's great. You can, produce your own calories, but you didn't focus on water at all. And suddenly the grid goes down and you don't have water. You A, can't keep your garden going, and B, you don't have anything to drink, right? So we have to be multifaceted. It's very important. So we know, hey, what's up, Prepper Now? Good to see you. We know that there is a lot of other things happening, and we know that other countries are considering what they're going to do next based on the current environment. So basically, what this panel is trying to say is that if China is going to do something over in Taiwan, they're going to do it in a way that's going to hand everything over in one big hoorah, basically, right? Because what they want to do is go big, go early. Because basically what they're seeing happening overseas right now is that if you don't go big right off the bat, you might not get things done as quickly as you would like, and things don't get easier by any means. They actually get more difficult the longer something takes, right? So their ideas, I guess, according to this panel anyway, is that if they are going to go over there and try to, I guess in their opinion, retake their territory, then they're going to do it bigly, in a very strong fashion, and in a way that doesn't, necessarily allow for a response. And I think that there's a lot of evidence towards that, and there's no reason to believe they wouldn't. In fact, especially knowing that we're involved with the training and helping with the defensive capabilities of that region, I think that would probably be the most strategic way to go about it, which means that we would see China come in there with a show of strength that we did not even see here recently with this other conflict. And I think that that's something that should definitely concern you. And we also know that there's a lot of resources and a lot of economic gain to be had by them taking that part of the world back over, I guess, in their opinion, and then to deny the access of those resources to other countries would be an extremely powerful tool. So if there's something, going to happen over there, if there was going to be aggression in that region and they were going to try their best to take that island back, I think we are going to see it in a very fast and strong way. And right here, it even says it's basically kind of like what happened during the Gulf War, right? Where you go in big and you have a huge air campaign and you just get in there and get it done, compared to things that have happened since then. And I think that that is a reasonable expectation. So if that conflict were to come to fruition, I think the expectation should be that it's going to be a big deal and it's going to happen fast and in a way that nobody necessarily expected. Okay. And that's just kind of the information that's being put out there. Now, a lot of people are concerned because, with the way things are going right now, the global integration of everybody's economies and the supply chain and everything else related to that, if these things happen and embargoes or trade wars come afterward, then suddenly we lose access to a lot of supplies and a lot of resources. And we literally don't have some of the things we need in order to sustain as a country without countries like China right this second. As much as that pains me to say that, people will say, well, we can do it here, we can do it here. And there's a lot of truth to that, except for we're not set up for it yet. And it will take time to overcome that curve, right? And so at the end of the day, one of the biggest things China has over us is going to be their APIs. The fact that they have all the active ingredients in pharmaceuticals, and we basically rely on them solely to get everything we need for our medicine. And that's a big, big deal. It's something that a lot of people forget about from time to time, but that's huge. And then if they take over the ability to produce and manufacture semiconductors and microchips and then deny access to those, I mean, that's huge as well. And things really start to spiral downhill very fast if that happens. So these things are things we just need to keep in mind. Now, let's see here. We have, so like Robert Kaufman says that they have a poorly tested military, right? And I think there's some truth to that. Historically, they haven't done a lot. The Taiwan operation won't be smooth, but while the U.S. is weak, it's the time to do it. And, when you say weak, a lot of people will scoff at that because, of course, we have a great military. We have the greatest military in the world, right? But we also have bad leadership in many ways, and we seem to be making a lot of bad decisions, and incompetence seems to win over logic relatively often lately. So there's a big reason for people feeling that way, and I totally understand it. Now, moving on from there, okay? We have this whole food crisis happening, right? Now, the food crisis situation is global. It's not just the United States. It's not just that conflict region, but it's happening everywhere. And so we're getting a lot of back and forth on that whole food crisis. And it is interesting because people are, trying to argue about whether or not there's going to be these issues. So, for example, let's talk about the EU a little bit here. Now, Hungary is a country in the EU, right? And they've had price caps on certain food for months now. In fact, they have price caps on these foods since before the conflict actually started. So this isn't just about that conflict, although the media and a lot of other sources will have you believe that because it actually helps perpetuate their whole narrative that, everything's fine and it was fine until this happened, but that's their fault, right? But this is all happening since before then, okay? They put these price caps on 6 basic foodstuffs as of February 1st, right? To fight inflation ahead of their elections. Now, keep in mind that these are price caps on sugar, flour, cooking oil, pork legs, chicken breasts, and milk. All right. These are very basic food groups right there. This is not, obscure food items that got too expensive to warrant price caps. These are things that they knew the people needed to basically survive or get by on. Now, these price caps are actually supposed to expire come May 1st. Now, that being said, let's go ahead and pop over here to another similar article. Okay. But now they're talking about facing a shortage of basic food items due to the price cap. So the price caps work to a degree, but then still, because those foods are still affordable, they're being bought. And because there's price caps being placed on them, the general public says, hold on a second, this is an issue. We got to get some of this food, right? So you have this whole situation kind of going on top of itself where you put the price caps on so people can afford it. People buy it all because it's affordable for right now, but they know it's expiring May 1st, and then they run out, right? So the price cap still didn't necessarily do the job of keeping food in people's pantries. Now, the food prices could rise to 20 to 30% without the cap. So people know that, so they're going to do, what do we do, right? We're preppers. They buy the food, they stock up on it while they can still afford it, and they put it away. Okay, I'm sure a lot of people have a lot of frozen chicken and pork in their fridge. They have tons of flour stashed away. They're doing what they can, I'm sure. But that being said, okay, This is all how it works. And we need to watch this and pay attention to it, because what's happening in Hungary right now is going to happen in other places around the world. Doesn't matter if you're in the US, Canada, New Zealand. I know there's a lot of people from different countries here in the chat right now. So, and feel free to check in if you want. Make sure you can try to, talk to other people within your area if you see them here. But these are things that are coming our way. It's not just, oh, Hungary. Oh, they're just a country in Europe. What's the big deal? Well, they're in the EU. Now, why does that matter? Well, here's what's interesting about this whole thing. You know how we keep talking about how there's this like back and forth, how one week they tell you one thing and the next week they tell you something different, right? This is exactly what's happening to this exact situation as well. And it's just to stop the panic. And the fact that they're trying so hard to stop the panic is a indicator that things are bad, because otherwise they wouldn't be that worried about it now, would they? Coffee, just so good. All right. Are there food shortages in the EU? And yes, I have daughters and I have cars, so I bought tires and bathing suits. Get over it. Now, here's what they're saying, okay? Households around the world will feel the effects of the conflict when they go shopping. Basic foods are going up in price, blah, 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 all the usual stuff, right? The UN Food and Agricultural Organization warned that food prices have reached an all-time high March 2022 worldwide, okay? That's something to consider. That means things are getting so expensive that the UN just has to tell you that that's the case right now, right? Now, here's the thing, okay? Where is it here? There's something here. Despite these figures, the EU Commission assumes that the EU can cushion the loss of trading partners, and basically saying that the EU is largely self-sufficient in food with a high agricultural surplus. The European internal market can absorb shocks. Okay, so down here, it goes into the EU has an export of surplus agricultural products, right? And then over here, they talk about, rationed sunflower oil in Germany. Got it. Now, here's what I want you guys to keep in mind, okay? They are telling us in this article, okay, food security EU itself is not at risk. The Union is now concerned with tackling food shortages outside of its own borders. But don't worry about the EU, it's fine. So they're not worried about shortages and they're not at risk, okay? Because they can, produce enough agriculturally to be fine. And they have enough internal agriculture to keep up with the shortages and everything else. Except for, we just saw 2 articles about how Hungary had to put price caps on certain food items. And even those price caps didn't work in the sense of the food is still running out and the shortages still exist. So basically, you're hearing both answers from both sources. And at the end of the day, I think we know which one is actually true. We know that the food shortages are actually a real thing. And individual governments are having to come out and do something about it. We talked about France doing food vouchers for middle and low income families. And we know that food is getting more expensive here in the United States. But either way, you still have these media corporations coming out trying to tell you that don't worry, there's no shortage and the EU will be totally fine. But Hungary's in the EU. So apparently if one country is struggling and having food shortages or having to put price caps on food, no big deal, because the other ones are fine, right? I don't buy it, and neither should you. Obviously, we just saw that even Germany said they have a shortage of sunflower oil, which we know why. Obviously, that's one of the biggest exports from the conflict zone right now. But at the same time, what does that tell you? That they're still out of something. So the EU trying to placate everybody and say that we'll be fine is just a strategy to avoid any kind of panic. And that is something that you should keep in mind, because they're always going to try to do that up until the very last minute, no matter what. And at the end of the day, I think that we are going to see food shortages no matter where you are, and that's just what it is. Now, Kevin Brown said, are they hungry in the EU? Now, let's see. Friend in London admitted a cooking oil shortage, right? So there you go. And that's just stuff that's happening. Northern Girl Hobbies, thanks for being here. Let's see here. John Matrix says, read the Bible, then you won't worry, okay? And I understand where you're coming from on that. One thing I want to say about that, and this is just something for you guys to kind of glean, I guess I would say, but either way, regardless of how strong your faith is, you still want to make sure you can live in a somewhat comfortable way and survive as best you can with the resources that are available to you, right? So whether or not those things will end up working out in everyone's favor due to faith and whatnot, in the meantime and in the interim, when things could get very bad, I still want my family to be comfortable and as safe as possible. So that's why I still prepare, and that's why I worry about things, because I have other people that count on me that won't understand why their faith could be all they possibly need, right? So these are just things to consider. And I just want you to consider that as well, because I do see a lot of those type of comments, and I understand why. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't prepare at all either, right? I'm pretty sure Noah still had to build an ark. Just saying. Now, okay. Let's see here. And thanks, John Matrix. Totally get it. Yep, agreed. Carrie C., welcome from Ontario, Canada. Hello. Now, all right, let's move on. There is more happening, okay? One of the things that's happening in this country, and one of the things that should definitely concern you, is the level of desperation that is kind of rearing its ugly head. And at the end of the day, we are also experiencing a decline of mental health. And I think that that is going to be one of the side effects of the last 2 years that are going to linger with us for a very long time, because people have been put into a situation that they can no longer survive in many ways. Okay, so let's talk about some of the things that are happening right here in the United States, as well as in other countries, I'm sure. So we have this whole baby formula shortage, right? Now, why is this a big deal? Why should this matter to you? Most of you might not, care about it at all, or maybe you have babies, but you don't rely on formula. Maybe you have breastfed children, or maybe you have other ways to, acquire your formula, or you have enough stocked up, or whatever it is, But at the end of the day, this should concern you for certain reasons. Okay, there's product recalls, there's supply chain issues, there's all kinds of stuff. But this baby formula shortage has definitely happened, right? We know that, okay? Now, here's what we want to keep in mind when it comes to things like this. This is a desperation item. This is not something that people can just do without. If they need it, they literally need it. And people will do anything to take care of their babies, right? They will do anything. And these types of events, these types of shortages are the most dangerous kind in many ways, because when people can't get what they need to make sure their baby stays alive, they will do what they have to get it. And this is what we should keep in mind when we're going to see more and more of these shortages. Okay, these shortages are becoming more dangerous based on who they affect. And this is what is going to compound with people's mental health as well. This is an issue that we have to keep in mind, because people are starting to make hard decisions and sacrifices. And one thing they won't sacrifice is not being able to feed their baby, right? So moving on from there, we can talk about how it's not just baby formula, obviously, but the inflation prices of everything going up right now, how expensive things are getting, is actually causing people to have to make choices on what they will or will not buy, which means what they will or will not eat, and what they have to go without. And most of the choices they're having to make right now is what they will do without, more so than with what they will get. And that is going to cause more of those same problems. That desperation becomes an issue. And this is just, one of those articles that kind of just references that whole situation. But they're talking about, rent going up, utilities going up, the cost of food, the cost of gas. Like, we have 48% cost of gas going up in the last year, right? And groceries are up 10%. I definitely disagree with that, and I'm sure you do too. My groceries are definitely up more than 10%, right? Because last time I bought a dozen eggs for $1.68 was maybe 4 or 5 months ago, and now they're $3, and I'm pretty sure that's more than 10%. So I'm just going to throw that out there, but 10% is wrong. So good job, NPR, but as usual and as expected, not the best reporting. So that being said, people are being interviewed. They're talking about how they live in like a mobile home. They can't afford to heat it. They can't afford gas. So at the end of the month, they're literally in the negative now. And that negative just keeps growing every single month that goes by. Of course, there's ways to adapt to these things, right? You cut costs, you get another job, whatever it is. But at a certain point, people literally can't afford any more time to dedicate towards things like work, and eventually just have what they have. Not everybody can just go out and do whatever it is they want in the sense of earning an income. So, and I understand people will say, well, those people just need to do better or try harder or whatever. Like, literally, some people can't. I'm not going to try to downplay that. Now, John Matrix, thank you for that. I really appreciate it. But this is happening, okay? People are getting to that point. They can't afford the things they need. They have to pay all of their income to bills. And at the end of the month, they're not even sure how they're going to eat. So how do you think that's going to go, right? How do you think this is all going to turn out? We are going to start seeing things get more and more desperate. That's just my opinion. I honestly believe that, okay? I think that some of the things that we've been witnessing here recently is a byproduct of these times, of the situations we've all survived through over these last 2 years, okay? Now, this is a story about how America's mental health crisis is a security issue. Okay. Now, this is an interesting story. Okay. And one of the reasons why I thought it was interesting is because the story here, it talks about what happened in the New York City subway, right? Which was obviously a terrible thing. We don't want to see more of these things happen. But with the way things are going in the world and the way things are going in the sense of people becoming more desperate, I expect to see more things like this happen. And as much as I don't want them to, I'm going to assume that they will, which gives me better situational awareness when I'm out in large crowds. That being said, okay, this article actually talks about the mental health of these people that commit these crimes more so than any of the other talking points you usually expect to see in an article like this. And it does talk a lot about how these last couple of years definitely thrashed mental health in this country. It talks about a lot of the things that are going on in the world right now that are pushing people to that brink. And I think that it's an interesting topic to keep in mind because this is a precursor or almost a like a prequel to what we could expect during a long-term emergency event, right? If something was to happen catastrophically to this country or anywhere in the modernized world, people's mental health that's already damaged from the last 2 years of struggle and strife, living off of government stimulus or having to, figure out new living situations or whatever it is, okay? It's not going to just get better. And when something major happens, it's going to get much worse. And those acts, these criminal acts, will only become more and more frequent. In fact, when without rule of law actually exists, you should expect to see a ton of this kind of stuff because those people finally have the outlet that they haven't had this whole time. Now, this is something you need to keep in mind when it comes to your own personal preparedness. We all know people that struggle with mental health. We all know people that maybe rely on medication and stuff to maintain their level of mental health. Those are things you have to be aware of now and try to adapt to when that time comes. If somebody you live with or have in your inner circle is, manic depressive and they need medication in order to avoid some of their, episodes, you might say, and you find yourself in an SHTF scenario with those people and they don't have medication, you have to be ready to adapt to that situation and do the best you can with what you have. These are things you need to consider now. And this is where our society is heading in many ways. Culturally, we are going down the toilet in many ways, right? And we are going to see more of this kind of behavior. Now, just so everybody's aware, and I'll put a link to this in the comments or in the chat, just so you guys have it. But just make sure you have some concept, okay? Basic concept of like what to do in those situations. Because one thing I've realized recently is that I have a hard time of assuming everybody has like the same information or knowledge or training or whatever it is that I have, right? I assume everybody would know this or know that. And then I realize like a lot of people don't. So I want to share this information. And this is super basic stuff, but just check it out. And it gives you basic ideas and concepts as to what to do if something like that New York City subway situation happened when you are there. And like the best things you can do in order to stay alive during it. This is prepping and survival that we're talking about here, and surviving a situation like that's a big deal. And if more and more of these types of events are likely to occur, having that strategy in mind is a good idea, right? You don't want to learn how to deal with it during the event. Have this stuff in mind now and be prepared for it if it ever comes your way. So look, like I said, this is super basic information. This is not going to replace taking like an actual in-person training class from somebody that is a very reputable background. But at the same time, it gives you a mental strategy to work with that might help give you something, give you something over the rest of the crowd, which will possibly keep you alive. So keep those things in mind. Now, remember earlier in the chat when I said we were going to talk about some of the things going on overseas right now and how some of the things we are doing is actually escalating the situation? Well, we're going to talk about that here in just a second, okay? Now, one thing I want to talk about real quick, okay? Guys, you already know this. Weekly, fleethecity.com has been sponsoring the live streams just to kind of help the channel out. And obviously, there's a lot of projects in the future I'm working on. And right now, they're working on a project with 24 acres in an older farmhouse that borders the U.S. Forest Service in northwestern Montana. So they're calling it Majestic Ranch. It's a project they're working on. They're trying to look for people who are interested in something along those lines. So if you're interested in something like that, and it sounds like a bug out or a self-reliancy location that you're looking for, go to fleethecity.com, tell them Magic Prepper said what's up, and that you're looking for information on Majestic Ranch. It's a project they're working on. And these guys are preppers. They are preppers. They're trying to build a community in the future here where it's just preppers all living together in a neighborhood, basically, that all have their own bunkers and all have their own self-sustainable gardens and everything else that you would ask for in a preparedness, community basically. So keep that in mind. But those guys are working on that Majestic Ranch situation right now, and it's something that seems like a good opportunity for somebody who might be looking for that type of a retreat. Is the best way I would say it. So make sure you check them out, and I'll put a link in the description for that, as well as let's drop it in the chat real quick. But we do need to talk about what is happening in the sense of the U.S. possibly escalating the situation. I think that we are going to find that we are going to escalate the situation more and more every single day, and it's not something that I think that we want to see happen, okay? I'm just going to type this in real quick because I don't want to talk and type at the same time, because then I'll do one of the two wrong, I guarantee it. Now, here's what I want to say, okay? We are, in many ways, doing what some would call a level of warfare known as economic, right? So let's just talk about that real basic, real quick here. This is Wikipedia. You can't fully trust it, right? But some of these basic definitions are just what they are, okay? So basically, economic warfare, okay? Let's just talk about baseline what that definition is, right? An economic strategy utilized by belligerent nations with the goal of weakening the economy of other states. This is primarily achieved with the use of economic blockades. Ravaging the crops of the enemy is a classic method used for thousands of years, right? But it's also talking about economic policy followed as part of open or covert operations, cyber operations, information operations during or preceding a war. Economic warfare aims to capture or otherwise to control the supply of critical economic resources so friendly military and intelligence agencies can use them and enemy forces cannot. Now, that's just a basic definition. Now, when I read that definition, can you apply that to the things that are happening overseas right now? Can you apply that to things, I don't know, like sanctions or like bank asset freezing, seizures and everything else related to what's going on over there? Okay. Now, I think it's pretty easy to do, right? I think that's pretty easy to correlate. And, not that it's not justified and not that it's not something that, people might feel needed to happen, but is that what's happening in the sense of who is looking at it that way? And that's actually what matters, okay? When the other side of that situation, the aggressor, is looking at it in the sense of economic warfare, how do you respond to that? Because warfare is warfare, right? Economic or not, that is happening. So how do they respond to it? This is something you should consider and be concerned about. Now, this is based on an article from The Economist that says, giving them heavy weapons does not mean NATO is at war right now, okay? Yet, that's just the textbook definition, right? That's what the UN has said is fine. That's what everybody has agreed upon in the past as to not being defined as actual, declaration of war. But at what point does it cross that threshold according to the people who it's affecting the most, right? According to the people who are now losing heavy equipment because of these levels of aid that are being given out. This is exactly what you have to keep in mind, okay? Just because the UN and NATO and everybody on that side of the argument says it's not actually, war, doesn't mean that the other side doesn't feel that way. And that is actually a big deal and actually a big consideration based on the fact that what they perceive is what matters, because it's their reaction that we should be concerned about the most right now, not the other way around. Are we concerned about what the invaded country does? No, they have every right to fight back and do what they do, of course, okay? What I'm concerned about is what the aggressor is going to do in retaliation for some of these actions. And the fact that the aggressor, by the way, has the largest nuclear stockpile of any country in the world, or at least what's on paper, right? So keep that in mind, because just because everybody says this is not illegal and this is allowed and everybody's on board and okay with it, doesn't mean that the one place that it's affecting the most is on board and okay with it, right? So don't use that as a justification for why it's not a big deal and why it's fine. It's fine because this isn't actually against the law, right? We talked about this a little bit earlier. What is the law when it comes to war, right? Things happen in war that are not pretty and not anything that any of us want to experience. And for those of you who have experienced it, I'm sure you can definitely say from your own experience that it's not something the people who have it would ever want to see or deal with. And I think a lot of people underestimate just how terrible it can be. Now, all right, let's see here. Admin Honor says, that there's commanders on the ground there that are directing everything already. I mean, that's probably true. I'm not going to argue with you on that. I already know there's tons of citizens from all around the world that are on the ground there doing things. And at a certain point, it can be looked at as foreign aggression, right? So now let's look at this whole situation, right? Now, they're saying, stop providing these weapons. Stop. Because it's going to provoke them. Right. Well, obviously, that's what I'm trying to purvey here is that we have everyone saying it's fine because this is just legal, right? It's legal. Well, okay, what else is legal that would be frowned upon during a situation, right? A lot of things, I would assume, right? Okay, so either way, just because it's legal doesn't mean everybody's going to be happy with it. Okay. Now, they're saying, look, if you guys keep doing this, we're going to have unpredictable consequences, right? And basically, this whole conversation is about adding fuel to the conflict. This is what I'm trying to say. We are escalating it ourselves in many ways. It's not just about what's going on. And you can argue either side if you want. You can say that, well, it's what we have to do. Great. That's fine. I'm just telling you that if that's the case, that just is what it is. But we also are escalating the situation by doing so. So we have to be prepared for the repercussions of that escalation. Are you prepared for that? Are you willing to accept those repercussions based on what they could or could not be? I mean, these are all considerations we should be making as people who are prepared right now. And all of this aid that's going over there. Great point, actually, that was recently in Southern Prepper 1's video, okay? But that's a lot of resources, a lot of equipment, a lot of money that is all being drained to support that conflict region right now, right? So it's a good thing we won't need any of that. It's a good thing we don't need that money or any of those supplies, right? Hopefully we don't. But that is something else to consider. And this is just another exercise for your own preparedness, right? If you go around giving away everything you have because you need to help other people, and then you don't have anything left, how are you going to survive at that point in time? And it's just something to keep in mind, okay? Look, there are times when charity is important. I think supporting your community or helping your neighbor could be a big difference in a force multiplier during an SHTF scenario. However, you also got to make sure you have what you need. And that means making sure that you're taken care of first, right? And I don't know if that's what's happening. And a lot of people are looking at this current situation now with a side eye of an economic sponge or even maybe a bullet sponge, right? Here is a place where lots and lots of weaponry and lots of money is being dumped into that will never, ever be seen again, okay? It's not like any of that aid is just going to magically come back on airplanes and cargo ships one day, right? We can't even get cargo ships unloaded now anyway. But I'm just saying, we're not going to get that stuff back. Look what we left in Afghanistan. Oh, looks like it's all just still there. Good thing we don't need any of that equipment either, apparently, right? So here we are. These are the things that we have to definitely keep in mind. Now, let's see here. I want to talk about one more thing related to this exact subject, okay? It's just a reminder of this escalation that we're all witnessing. This is why you need to be prepared for this, okay? And we have to adapt to these situations so that we can survive them. We will not survive if we don't adapt. I honestly believe that. And if we just keep trying to do the same things over and over and over again, but they're getting more expensive or harder to acquire or harder to do, it's going to make that survival more difficult, right? So we have to pivot and find other ways to accomplish our goals without failing. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do. And I am actually, I'm working right now with a couple other companies that are going to help provide things that we need in case there is a shortage from one or another, right? So, for example, I'm looking at working with a food company here soon, right? I know everybody does it, but I think food is probably the number one thing we need to be focused on right now. However, there's a lot of guys who are already working with companies like Nutrient Survival, right? Or Augustin Farms and stuff. So I'm going to try to find a different company so that way at least somebody might have something if that time ever comes when the shortages are hitting hard and nobody can acquire what they need. So we should, as a community, at least in my opinion, try to spread out and maybe offer different resources so that way if something's out or unavailable from one place, we can access it at another. And I don't mind doing that at all. I think there's some great creators in this community that have some great relationships. And if you don't know about Nutrient Survival and you don't watch Alaskan Prepper, I mean, that guy will tell you all about it. So those are just things to keep in mind. But that's also why I'm not going to work with Nutrient Survival because Rudy's got that on lock. All right. So now, Western arms convoys are legitimate targets. Okay. This is something you got to keep in mind as well. These convoys are being told they're legitimate targets. And we're talking back from March 12th. okay? All of this is still happening. And we just talked about the article where the Pentagon is expanding our aid in that region. And the expansion applied to helicopters and Humvees and howitzers and all kinds of heavy equipment. And that equipment is just supposed to make it there unscathed without escalating any kind of a situation when we have this declaration right here saying that these arms convoys are legitimate targets. All it takes is one, right? It just takes one mishap, one overzealous officer or soldier, right? One mistake for this whole situation to escalate into something much, much bigger. And when you involve countries like the United States and you have all this aid coming in from all over the world, and you have foreign fighters in that area that are signing up to help out, but are still from another country, and then you have all of these warnings and threats being put out there, and they're not being paid attention to, or at least being ignored from at least one side or the other. I find us in a very challenging situation. I find us in a very dangerous situation where a lot of this can happen very quickly, all of a sudden. And one of the things that is interesting, and I want everyone to kind of keep this in mind, okay? This situation is now getting close to being like 2 months old, right? Like we're getting close to that mark. I think next week it'll be 2 months, right? So 2 months. Nobody expected it to last 2 months, right? I'm sure the people at the top did, but I'm sure the media told everyone else it wouldn't. And then all of our expectations were that it'd be fast or whatever. And now here we are 2 months out. Every day this goes on is one more day where something terrible can happen, right? Every day this goes on is one more day where people are demanding action. And this is the situation we find ourselves in, where the faster this thing is over, the better, but it's not going to be over anytime soon. And the longer it lasts, the higher the odds of something very negative happening are. And we know that that's just the way numbers work, right? The more chances you have, the more likely you're going to hit jackpot. And in this situation, the jackpot is a bad prize, not something anybody wants to win, okay? And just keep in mind, okay? A lot of this information coming out of mainstream media and these Western sources are always going to put things into a perspective that makes you feel better about the situation, right? The whole idea, like I said, with the food shortages and what the EU is saying in the sense of there's nothing to worry about. And then Hungary as a country is having these price caps and has shortages. It's all about trying to keep you from being concerned or freaked out or worried about what's going to happen, because at the end of the day, they need people to get back to work, right? Go to your job, make that money, and get that income tax, right? So basically, stuff like this where you're getting told that, there's a far better resistance than many expected, right? But to continue it, they'll need more help, okay? Right, exactly. All these things are being said in a way that makes it feel like not only is things going well, or are things going well, grammar's just a little off tonight, I guess, but at the same time, we need to do more, though. And every time we do more, and every time we play with fire, eventually you can get burnt. And that is something that I'm definitely concerned about right now. We are... we are in a bad spot in many ways on the global stage and in what could occur here very soon and what could spiral out of control from this situation. And don't let anybody talk you out of that situation. Don't let anybody tell you that there's nothing to worry about. Because what does that do, right? So you guys can be as comfortable as you want. You can say, yeah, I'm fully prepared, so whatever happens, happens. Well, that's great. And you know what? It's probably for the best. And that's a good place to be. But that doesn't mean you shouldn't be concerned about the situation, okay? That doesn't mean we shouldn't be keeping an eye on what's going on, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't be prepared for it to get worse. A lot of people will use that comfort and that justification to tell you that you need to chill out and stop concerning yourself with it. And it's not a big deal. Just keep doing what you're doing. You'll be fine. But I don't like to give people that type of advice. For me, I like to see people motivated, moving, and getting things done while they can. And especially when we're fighting an inflationary race where people are every day being priced out of being able to acquire what they need, I think that urgency is important. And I think that times like this mean that urgency is necessary. And we should definitely keep pushing as far as we can until that day comes when we can't push any further or something catastrophic happens that we never wanted to have happen, okay? So let me know what you guys think in the chat. Sorry, I've been just going at it tonight, but there's a lot to cover, and there's a lot of things that we have to keep in mind. I just had a big snowstorm here, right? There was a blizzard during the weekend. Yes, a lot of naysayers in the video comments telling me, that there was no snow and there's no wind and you could see a mile and a half. Look, I live here. I have no reason to lie to you guys about a freaking blizzard, man. So I'm sorry. And in case you guys don't know this, shorts videos aren't monetized. So, or at least mine aren't. So, I didn't have any incentive to post that video other than just to let you guys know that we were dealing with a blizzard, right? But that blizzard then turned into more snow. And I have actually more snow on the ground like yesterday than I did during the blizzard. At the end of the day, we found out a lot about just basic human behavior and stuff because of just a snowstorm. Just because of a snowstorm, people are losing it, right? Where's the plows? Can someone come, use a bobcat for my driveway? Your driveway, get a shovel out, man. What are you doing, right? But people just are unwilling to do these things, or they literally don't even own a shovel. And then you also have the people who needed food that didn't have any food, even though they had 5 days warning before a blizzard hit. Then you have the people that are calling, every company wondering if they're open or when the power is going to be back or whatever it is. And it's just one of those things where you realize quickly how unwilling people are to prepare and how unwilling people are to adapt to a situation as basic as a snowstorm. Stay inside for 3 or 4 days. What's the big deal? Oh, you have to go to work. I get that, but if you can't get there, you can't get there, right? And then for some people, it's just they don't want to admit that they have to stay indoors. They don't want to admit that they got beat by the blizzard, so they get out and they have to go somewhere and prove to everyone it's no big deal, right? And those people are actually relatively dangerous in many ways. And then I'm not saying dangerous in the sense of being a danger to you. But what I'm saying is that mentality has a level of peer pressure to it that pushes other people to feel that they are emboldened to act in a similar fashion because they don't want to be the loser or the weakling who couldn't deal with just a snowstorm. So I guess I need to go out too and prove myself to the rest of this crowd, which is a ridiculous standpoint. But a lot of people act that way in any situation. You will see it, I guarantee you. There's this best way to say it, bro mentality, I guess, of like, I'm tough and I don't need to deal with this storm and I can handle it, right? It's the same thing you see when someone wears a t-shirt at negative 20 degrees. It's more about being tough than it is about being practical. And when it comes to preparedness, we need to be practical and we need to be logical, right? And I'm okay with just chilling at home for a few days if I have to, all right? Do I like it? Not necessarily, because it is nice to be able to just go out and do what you got to do. But so what? A few days is whatever. But for some people, it seemed like it was the end of their life. They had to figure it out no matter what, right? And that's just how it is. So honestly, a great learning experience, but also another red flag in the sense of how society reacts to these types of scenarios, all right? And here's what I guarantee you. The person who has to ask somebody to bring a bobcat to their front door in order to get their driveway plowed or whatever is also not going to have a shovel next year either, right? And that's just how it's going to be. And those people are just willing to rely on other people for all of their basic needs when it comes to things like an emergency. And that is a big, scary problem for all of us, because if that's how they feel now, when they could literally just go buy a shovel, wait until they can't, right? Wait until they can't go get those things that they actually need. And wait till they can't post on Facebook about who can come save them, who can come dig me out or pull my car out or whatever it is. We live somewhere where this happens all the time. And nobody's willing to just buy a snowblower or a shovel. I mean, it's crazy to me. I bought a snowblower brand new for $200 last year when it was summer because they're out of season. It's just what you do sometimes. But here we are. So now, Minuteman69 said, my boss won't let me sit at home. I get that. I totally get that. But at the same time, those are decisions you're going to have to make one day in the future where you say, okay, right now these conditions are literally life-threatening and I'm just not going to go. And if you fire me, you fire me. I know everybody acts like that's the end of the world, but that's sometimes the decisions that have to be made no matter what the situation is, right? We have to put our priorities ahead of whatever they are. And sometimes loss of income is actually a backseat to staying alive. And I think that's going to be a huge struggle during true SHTF. When that first balloon goes up, right? What is everybody going to do? Probably go to work, right? Okay, now, Minuteman69, you're awesome. Not trying to clown on you or anything like that. I hope we are understanding on that. Joy, okay? We need to factor natural events or astronomical events that can and will affect worldwide, very least regional. We are in a terrible, horrible position. Or Jay, sorry. Joy, Jay. I hope you are joyful, Jay. Now, what I want to say is you're right. There are natural disasters that can still jump on top of us at any minute that are out of our control. even if all this conflict stuff doesn't actually overflow. That's why preparedness is so important, because it's not just about one thing. You know, we can be focused on what's happening overseas right now, and then Yellowstone could blow. Okay, who cares about that anymore? No one. So that can happen at any point in time. I 100% agree with you, and it's why we need to keep preparing to the best of our ability and try to be as multifaceted as you can, okay? Don't get hyper-focused, and make sure you get the things that you need. Tomorrow, I'll be talking about what is, I guess, currently a priority for some of the people overseas right now, which is a learning lesson for us. People will look at some of these videos or some of this content, and they'll say, okay, well, you know, but what they have going on probably won't happen here. Okay, sure. But if it does, here's what they need and what they're asking for, which can tell us what we might need to prioritize or at least consider. And there are things on that short list. It's a very short list, I guarantee you. But it's a short list, and there are things on that list that some people I know have specifically avoided purchasing or avoided interacting with because they feel like it's so unnecessary. Yet over there right now, they're asking for it. So these are things to keep in mind, and I will have that video coming out tomorrow, so it should be a good time. But listen, you guys are amazing. Every Monday, this is important. We get together, we make this stuff happen, okay? True North Tactical, yes, somebody called me out for it. It was just a Wednesday for them or whatever. That's just how it goes. That's how it always goes. But let's see here. And either way, I just want you guys to know that networking and building a community is huge. You have to do it. Let me give you an example why this is so important. There's a great guy in my area. I think we live about like 45 minutes apart, right? He is somebody I met, and here's what's interesting. Here's how small the world is, right? He's somebody who knew about this channel first. Then we met at an event that was a firearms training event because we both share that similar interest of wanting to be prepared and wanting to be ready for any type of event that could occur, right? And then we have networked via cell phone and Discord, right? And now we are planning on helping each other this summer with building shooting ranges on our properties. And he has access to equipment that I don't have and is willing to help me out with it. So these are things that you can establish now that actually can help you be more prepared and have people that you can rely on and build a relationship with that'll help you survive a situation. But without going out of my way to try to interact and meet some of these people and get involved with my local community, especially in the preparedness community, I would have never met this guy, and we would have never, become friends and never had the opportunity to work together to help each other out, right? So these are all things that we definitely should be working on right now, because you know what? I'll tell you one thing's for sure. If I suddenly see those Minuteman missile silos open up and start to see, vapor trails in the sky, I'll definitely be hitting him up because we're pretty close to each other compared to a lot of everyone else I interact with. So these are things that I want to mention. Ilea, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I recognize you from Marfugal. So, I'm a frequenter over there too, because I try to get information from all over the place, guys. And you should do the same. So don't get pigeonholed into one information source. Get as much information as you can. And I want you guys to understand that I am just trying my best to be prepared, and I'm just sharing what I do with all of you, so that way maybe it gives you some ideas. So look, if I ever do something that's wrong, or if you guys don't agree with me, just tell me. It's fine. But at the end of the day, keep in mind, I'm just some guy who's trying his best to wrap his head around this whole preparedness thing and do it in a way that seems logical. And I'm probably going to make some mistakes from time to time, but it is what it is. So without anything else to say, and wrapping it up here, now that we've been at an hour, that's going to be it for Magic Prepper.